Hello, thanks for joining us on this week's episode of Wise Content Creates Wealth. You've heard that content is king. Well, wise content rules the world. This podcast is about understanding how you can make and utilize wise content to improve your financial success and your company's bottom line. I am Joseph Franklin McElroy, and I'm a marketing technology expert who has built a multi-million-dollar business, and I'm also an award-winning content producer. My company is Galileo Tech Media, a leader in providing wise content and smart SEO. Our wise content is content that incorporates semantic science, behavioral science, AI, and data to make content that converts better and gets better rankings. So today, we're going to dive a bit into video and content analytics. So the first thing I'm going to point out is that Google just offered up some new resources for doing video SEO. So if you head over to Google's Search Central blog, which is developers.google.com/search/blog, you're going to find an article on new resources for video SEO. So the resources are essentially information, and there's some very insightful information at one point. So there's a new video, a lightning talk on the topic of video SEO best practices by Danielle Marshak, who's the product manager at Google. And then second, there's an updated help section on video SEO best practices. Now, what Google gave us in this information is what are the signals they actually use to understand and rank video. So, there was four areas essentially. There's on-page text, such as page titles, headings, and captions near the video, which is fairly standard practice. There's referral links, which are signals from other sites linking to the video. There's the video files themselves. They actually now really scan those files and understand the audio and visual content. And most importantly, they now are really looking at the structured data, the markup that communicates video metadata to Google. And there's a video meta tag now. I forget the exact definition of it, but you can go to that site I referenced to find it. But it's pretty important now, and structured data is going to become more and more important in understanding what is the signals that Google uses. And as we discovered in a previous podcast, they call those metadata as decorations for the search results. So decorating is like putting up the 5 stars or putting up extra questions and things like that. So they understand the contextual reference from the data, but then they also use it to decorate the results so that it's more informative to the user. So that being said, let's now move on to our guest. Brennan White is a serial entrepreneur and the leader in the AI for marketing space. Brendan founded Cortex, the first AI for creativity. How are you doing, Brennan?
Can't complain. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, sure thing. So, Brendan, you told me that since founding Cortex, you have been focused on spreading the word about the benefits of AI to creatives and marketers and empowering them to get ahead of the technology curve and taking back their data. What was your, before you got on that mission, what was your journey before founding Cortex?
Yeah, I'll go into that background. I was a creative person in my undergrad, in my studies. I actually a music composition major at Vassar College in Poughkeepsie, New York. And so went immediately after college directly into tech startups as a sales and marketing guy. And from there saw my CMO at one of the startups I worked for try to use YouTube for marketing. He spent $100,000 to create one YouTube video, which was a 9-minute song about Excel spreadsheets. And I'm not even joking you. This is completely true. In fact, I haven't looked for it in a while, but I'm sure it still exists, right? Internet never forgets, right? So as the resident 23-year-old, they didn't ask me, but as the only one who actually used YouTube at the time, because I was like the right demographic, I was just sitting there shaking my head saying, what the what the hell? And so I founded I said, I can be a consultant on this. Like, they spent more on that one video than I'm going to make this whole year as a sales guy. So,
Right.
so I hung a shingle out there with a co-founder, a friend of mine from childhood. We actually founded what ended up being one of the first social media agencies in the United States, kind of before Facebook even had business pages, before Twitter was even launched. And it ended up working out really well. And so we were there for many, many years. It's actually still running. It was on the
Pandemic. Is that Pandemic Labs?
Pandemic Labs.
Sort
exactly.
sort of a ironic title right now, but
The timing, yeah.
Yeah.
There's a whole story there about the name. It's
Yeah.
funny, but yeah, it's a funny time for having that name. But yeah, basically the long story, collapsing 15 years into 30 seconds, we saw the same problems at all. We sold mostly to the world's largest brands like Marriott and Post-it Notes and 3M, 3M, DirecTV, Dunkin' Donuts, big brands that we all know. We helped them figure out how to navigate content in this new content world, as things were changing so rapidly. And they all had this exact same problem. And I first thought, we kind of went to our vendors, our tech vendors that we were using, and we're like, which one of you is working on this? And none of them were. And so it was either, don't have the problem solved or do it yourself. And so we went that route. And my co-founder Matt and I both moved to Cortex, raised some funding, got a tech team involved, got data scientists involved, and
so when you launched, I saw a press release from 2015. You launched, and you called it a Cortex, an artificial intelligence program for social media marketing that helps brands increase their return on investment in social. But now you're focused, I think, what your focus is, what you say it is AI analytics for images and videos. Is that different than what you started in, or more precise, or what was the evolution there?
100%. Yeah, the customers, we knew the social angle very well, right? Because that's what we've been doing for 10 years prior. And so to us, what seemed like a social media problem, very quickly, as we started selling to customers and they started using the product, they started using the data and the insights for all of their creative decisions that involved visuals. And so, of course, we kind of that perked our ears up. We asked them, how are you using that for your in-store ads? What are you trying to achieve? And it was the same problem that everyone was having in social, which we can go into in detail, but kind of to summarize is we went from creating hundreds of pieces of content a year in a content group at a brand to tens of thousands over a very short period of time, right? So every brand had to all of a sudden become a giant content engine, and they didn't really have a way to do that. And so they were all suffering for the same exact problems that come along with that. And so, realizing that wasn't unique to social, and that using the insights that we were providing to help make better content in social, they wanted to use those insights everywhere. Not even on just limited to their advertising, but even beyond into product and packaging and everywhere. And so Cortex we realized very quickly that the opportunity wasn't social. The opportunity was anything visual, right? When your audience is going to see something, and their impact and reaction to seeing that is going to impact your business, you want to be able to de-risk and optimize that. And so very quickly we realized, okay, the same tech, it's the same tech. We added a lot of data once we realized that, but it was the same exact technology, just applied to a different data set, and a wider data set. And so, yeah, we kind of entered through the social door, but very quickly our customers made it very clear that there's a much bigger problem than that. And we had just initially, we're kind of seeing through the keyhole, just a little piece of it.
Now, do you still do the social, or is it mostly just now image and video?
Yeah, no, the way Cortex works is it uses machine learning to understand what your audience wants in terms of visuals, right? Before you've created any content. So, like before A/B testing were even to exist, or before even an idea, your team is committed or come up with a concept, right? It tells you what your audience wants down to nitty-gritty visual creative details, right?
I love
and
that.
So,
I love that little story you told me that if you have, sometimes you create a video or an image, and then the CFO comes in and says, well, I don't like that blue sweater, and you can't answer it. You can actually answer that, right?
Oh yeah, no. Yeah. Every creative, I don't know, what kind of people are listening, but every creative person, regardless of what they do, whether, I was in music before, right? Advertising, anything, they've had that experience where they've studied stuff, they've worked their whole career on something, they've put a lot of work into a campaign or a project or a work of art or whatever they do. And then at the 11th hour, the boss, some other person in the influence circle comes and expresses an opinion. We should change this to blue, as you said, or we should, refilm this, but with a different family in it, or whatever the thing is. And as a creative, that's an extremely frustrating experience, because the way we have traditionally treated creativity, and therefore kind of creative things in general, even when they're in business, is that they're entirely subjective. So what that means is anybody with an opinion that outranks you, your boss, perhaps your wife, someone in your life that outranks you, you have to traditionally kind of give into that opinion. And so regardless of how much work, regardless of your qualifications versus theirs, even if it's someone not in the marketing discipline, right, they can come in and express an opinion and derail your efforts, right? And everyone hates that. And the reason that is simply because there's no, or traditionally there has been no rigor in data to validate your choices, right? You can't say, I did this because. You say, well, I had a good idea and then I worked on it for a while and who cares, right? They're like, well, great, change it anyway. And so that's one of the things that Cortex solves.
Great. Well, when we come back, I want to talk a little bit about your experience with content over the years and how it's evolved and what can set the brands apart.
Cool. Look forward to it.
Listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Are you a conscious co-creator? Are you on a quest to raise your vibration and your consciousness? I'm Sam Leibowitz, your conscious consultant, and on my show, The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, we will touch upon all these topics and more. Listen live at our new time on Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern Time. That's The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, Thursdays, 12 noon on talkradio.nyc.
Are you interested in having a better relationship with yourself, others, and God? Greetings. I'm your host, Dr. George Andow, for the show A Journey Through into Awareness. On my show, we journey into the awareness that the mind of God is the true seat of our personal consciousness. We join together each Monday at 7 p.m., so tune in on Talk Radio NYC.
Did you know that nearly 1 in 5 adults in the U.S. battles mental illness? Hi, my name is Albert Dabo. I'm the host of the show Extra Innings. Extra Innings, I discuss the topics of wellness, mental health, and the experience of surviving multiple suicides within my family. Listen live every Monday at 6 p.m. Eastern to Extra Innings for discussions with sports figures, artists, mental health professionals, and many others. That's Monday at 6 p.m. Eastern on talkradio.nyc.
Hi, I'm Graham Dobbin. Join me every Thursday evening for the Mind Behind Leadership here on talkradio.nyc. We speak to people from business, sport, military, and politics, all around what makes a great leader. The personal experiences of what's worked and, maybe more importantly, what hasn't worked. So that's 7 o'clock every Thursday evening, the Mind Behind Leadership here on talkradio.nyc. Listen to real stories of real leaders.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC. Uplift, educate, empower.
Hello, it's Joseph Franklin McElroy back with the Wise Content Creates Wealth podcast and my guest, Brennan White. So Brennan, right before the break, you were talking about various things in the content space. And you mentioned, how all of a sudden you went from hundreds of thousands and tens of thousands of content. So you've been around this content, creating and forming content for brands for a while, and you've seen some changes. How has brand content changed since you got started?
Oh, dramatically. In the past 10 or 15 years, we if you ask kind of anyone who's been at a brand for a while, they went from creating dozens or a few hundred pieces of content a year, right? Television and emails and things like that, to literal tens of thousands. Right now, we have everyone's got a phone in their hand. Everyone's consuming more content than ever. There's been an arms race, and everyone at a brand is creating content for all of those new channels plus all the old ones, right? So the content has become 100x more numerous. So the workload for these people has dramatically exploded in a very short time. And the type of content's dramatically changed towards the instant engagement, thumb stopping, we'll call it. You're scrolling, you're kind of not paying attention. What gets you to just, grabs your attention and kind of activate your brain. So the content's changed dramatically.
Mm-hmm. That's I think the thing I always wonder, is all these new content channels. Are brands actually doing every one of them? Or do they use your analytics to discover which ones they should be on and which ones they don't? How do they know which channels to just like ignore?
Well, yeah, they do use analytics like Cortex to kind of prioritize. However, they are on almost all of them. And the way they view it is kind of like a castle, right? Before you had a castle, and let's say you're a market leader in your space. You had a castle with 5 gates to guard, right? Mm-hmm. If somebody did better television ads than you, they were storming that gate. So you had to also put resources to guard that gate. Same with radio, same with the other content gates. Now there's 25 gates, right? And they're adding more every year. And now TikTok matters and every brand cares about that. And they haven't stopped caring about Snapchat and Instagram and Facebook and all the other ones. So the problem is if you're the guy or the gal or the brand that owns a space, every new angle is a way for you to be disrupted, right? And so they have to play there. Like the famous story that they all are afraid of is, you're familiar with I forgot the name of the brand, the Dollar Shave Club.
Yeah.
Right. They didn't invent. Right. Yeah. They didn't invent razors. They didn't make new razors. There wasn't anything there. The thing that they did was they said Gillette and all these people aren't playing on online video where the millennials hang out, so we can go get that whole market by making a few awesome videos. And then they're gonna have to buy us for $1 billion, and you're right. And so effectively, Gillette's gates were stormed that they weren't defending, right? So if you're a big brand, you have to play on these gates, and they are. And so for them, they feel like it's a treadmill that's speeding up and speeding up and speeding up, that they have to keep pace with.
I was big, and I was working with a big media buyer at one point that was doing direct response type advertising on TV. And their people that were doing these commercials were seeing a decrease in leads generated by the commercials. They pick up the phone calls, and they measured it by the phone calls. And they started realizing after a while that 35 to 50% of the calls they used to get were now being driven online, because people weren't remembering the phone number. They were remembering the content of the ad and went on. And they effectively built, there was one company who was spending $17 million in television ads, and they built a competitor because all the competitor did was optimize for whatever they were doing their commercial for, and was capturing all those leads. So talk about disruption. It happens in everything. So
everywhere.
With all that content, and I know a little bit about this, but I want to hear your perspective. How are most brands creating all that content now?
Well, interestingly enough, they really haven't adapted well yet. And this is a generalization. Some of them are great, but that is the top 2% have a whole new process. They've completely pivoted. Most brands just added some bodies. They subscribe to a few technologies here and there, and they just have their agencies and their teams work much harder, right? And they also lower the bar for the content that they make, right? They just, okay, we don't have time to spend a month on each commercial now. We have maybe a few hours. We have to put 2 pieces out today. So, the bar gets lowered. So that's really the problem, right? Is branding wins, even traditionally, but especially now, right? You see D2C brands that are brand new. They have no business beating the incumbents who have 100 years on them in terms of brand love, yet they create some cool content, they go direct to consumer, they sell one product really, really well, they nail the content, and they're eating the lunch of everyone else, right? And so
Yeah.
the brands, most brands still haven't made that leap well.
No, and I mean, the reason I created the concept wise content, it's just about that. Up until now, and probably for the foreseeable future, creativity is a wisdom that really, is what humans excel at. But what is happening now is that creativity can also be driven by data and science and analytics and and behavioral things and semantics. So there's going to be tool sets that brands can use, right, to help design that content. But so you
Exactly
mentioned
right.
there's some brands that's doing it right. So what sets those brands content apart from the rest? Is it just the creativity, or I'm imagining it's more than just the creativity?
No, they respect their customer.
Yeah.
They nail what the audiences want, right? It's not. It sounds so pedestrian and so obvious, but most companies, most people are self-serving. They kind of put their business goal and they work backwards, and they say, okay, we need to talk about this new product next week, and so they make a piece of content about that product,
Mhm.
and here they are off to the races, and then a big content generation process starts where they go get their agency, they come up with an idea, they fund it, they do a photo shoot, weeks happen, and there's content about that product, and they never tried to, or in the past the problem was they couldn't ascertain reliably what the audience wanted to see before they put in all that effort. That's where Cortex plays, right? Is we use machine learning to tell you exactly what the content, the details your audience wants prior to spending any of that time. And the best brands do that. That's part of their process, is trying the hardest, either using Cortex or they've got their own way to try to get at what the audience wants and giving them what they want. Because nowadays, as we've seen, there's so many places I can go. I can look, I can get my content from everywhere. I can go to different, I can switch, the switching cost between effectively any brand is almost nothing. If you create content that pisses me off in the slightest, I'm leaving, right? I'm going to cancel you and go somewhere else, right? We've seen that everywhere. And so making sure you know exactly what they want and figuring out the Venn diagram of what your audiences want and what we want, and finding that overlap and creating that content is really the name of the game.
Now, when they're creating this content, do you think that I mean, you're there, so don't you think the best brands will create content, use the same ideas and the concepts for the audience, but they plan a bunch of content around a concept? Like, there's going to be snippets, there's going to be tweets, there's going to be, there's going to be social media posts, there's going to be a video, and is that whole universe part of what you guys also analyze?
Yeah, totally. That's the danger, right? If you commit to, right now, the process is they come up with an idea, they commit to it, they fund it, they budget it, the time starts where if it's a big series of content, it may take weeks or months to get all that content together. Then after they have all the tweets, all the videos, all the YouTube, everything, then they start to get feedback that it was a bad idea. The ship has already sailed, right? They've already run the process. They've already spent the time and the money. And so the danger there is the way content has traditionally been done, and the way most brands still do it, is it leads to a lot of those car crashes where you're kind of like trying to save something that was not a great idea to begin with, and it's too late, right? You can eke out a few, if you A/B test correctly and you kill the bad ads and you do focus groups, maybe you can get 10% more out of it or something. But you still, if you went in the wrong direction, you're still going in the wrong direction. You lost the opportunity cost of really crushing it, right? That's where the delta in performance really lies, is if you can get your content aligned with what your audience wants from the get-go, then you don't have to try to not fail by get 5% more at the back end of the process.
So you mentioned A/B testing. It's sort of an ancient tool now, right? And it's been the way to refine content ideas for a while. What do you think is wrong with that approach?
It's still the state of the art for a lot of brands, right? So it's not even ancient. it's
I
absolutely.
know it. I mean, I mean,
replaced.
we're using the teaching tool still. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's crazy that it's still the way to go. But yeah, it's kind of like what I just said, where A/B testing shows up after you've put your name behind it internally. So you get all the political ramifications. You've put the budget into it. You've sunk the time. Then we have content to show to people, and of course, it doesn't respect the audience, right? By showing them 1,000 versions or 10 versions or whatever, and just filling their plate with crap, pardon my French, and then figuring out, oh, here's the best piece of crap, right? That doesn't respect them, right? Respecting them is saying, I'm going to take the time to figure out what they want first. And everything I create is going to be in line with what they're asking for, right? And so that everything that they see, there may be some versions better than others, but by a small degree, but it's all something that they like, right? And so that's the big difference is A/B testing. You're kind of self-serving from the get-go by nature, and the best thing you can do is save you a few percentage points on the back end. It can't change a failing campaign to a winning campaign.
Yeah, I mean, it really fails most people on a mid and small size companies because there's not enough data really to tell you much.
So many problems, not enough
Yeah.
data. They're not sophisticated enough. It's too late. There's so many problems with it. It's
Right.
crazy.
All right. So when we come back, we'll talk more about how data can impact the creative process. All right.
Awesome.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC. Uplift, educate, empower.
Hey everybody, it's Tommy D, the nonprofit sector connector, coming at you from my attic. Each week here on talkradio.nyc, I host a program, Philanthropy in Focus. Nonprofits impact us each and every day, and it's my focus to help them amplify their message and tell their story. Listen each week at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time until 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on talkradio.nyc.
Are you a business owner? Do you want to be a business owner? Do you work with business owners? Hi, I'm Stephen Fry, your small and medium-sized business or SMB guy, and I'm the host of the new show, Always Friday. While I love to have fun on my show, we take those Friday feelings of freedom and clarity to discuss popular topics on the minds of SMBs today. Please join me and my various special guests on Friday at 11 a.m. on talkradio.nyc.
Do you run or are ready to open your own business? Hi, I'm Jeremiah Fox. I've been operating and opening small business for the last 25 years, and I'm the host of the new show, The Entrepreneurial Web. Tune in every Friday at noon Eastern Time for insights and stories on the nuances of running small business right here on Fridays at noon, talkradio.nyc.
Hi, I am Joseph Franklin McElroy, host of the new podcast, Wise Content Creates Wealth. It airs on talkradio.nyc every Friday afternoon from 1 p.m. to 2. They say content is king. Well, wise content rules the world. Every episode features tools and tips for content marketing and business people telling the wise content stories of that success. Tune in every Friday from 1 p.m. to 2 on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Hi, this is Joseph Franklin McElroy back with the Wise Content Creates Wealth podcast with my guest, Brennan White of Cortex, the leader in AI creativity. We're going to talk about data, and I was going to mention, one of the things that we do, we're in the SEO space, is, we use data like Search Console data to help determine which content's performing and which content we should prune, because bad content can really affect your SEO results, and even use it to suggest, further titles and things like that from the keyword data. So, data I know can have an impact on many parts of the brand's creative process, and you're in a lot more spots than I think than we are with your analytics. So, where have you seen it most effective?
That's a phenomenal question. I'd say another way to put that is it's important to understand, for a lot of listeners might not realize, that when you're making content at a brand, some of the content can be remade quickly, right? So text content, emails, things like that, it doesn't take a lot as soon as you find new information to tweak it, right? So it may have a huge impact, right? Maybe you find a new word or phrase or something that changes email open rates by 100%, who knows? That's awesome. But the downside is never quite as severe, right? But when you're talking about visuals, videos in particular, but also photos, right? You're talking about a much longer process, usually weeks, sometimes months, to come up with an idea, get it approved, get it budgeted, hire the models, book the photographer, rent the, get a permit for the section of beach you want to shoot on, right? And create the content. If you find out after that is a bad idea and your audience hates it, there's a huge cost that you've already sunk. There's a huge time that you've already sunk. So the data that can save that from happening is really, really valuable data, right? So what we see and what Cortex focuses on is visuals for that reason, or one of those, for that reason. So for us, it depends on the brand, it depends on the audience, it also depends on the channel. And even then, the tastes change over time. So there's very few rules that are universal, like people should be facing the camera or away, or things like that. There's very few specific pieces of data that always have an impact in the same direction. But we find that visual data has a huge impact, in some cases several 100% impact on performance. So it's being night and day different if you follow the data, and especially if you're combining different visual data choices into your outcome, it ends up being a huge impact. But that's of course biased. That is what Cortex does. We don't look as much into other types of decision making when it comes to creativity. Visuals are our focus, but kind of all the visual data of all the types, from colors to things in the image to how old the humans in the image are, or how many humans you have, or are the products standing or sitting, right? There's really thousands and thousands of things that matter. And it's hard to predict in advance which ones will matter most.
Well, what's mattering a lot in the SEO space is now personalization, because results are getting very personalized. So I think companies are focusing on being very customer centric and how to do mass personalization. And I think it's an avenue that's showing a lot of promise for them. So what do you think? How do companies get personalization right while they're still being efficient with their resources, especially in things like video and images, which can't be changed all that easily?
Yeah, it's funny. It's absolutely the path forward, 100%, right? If I could have a video or a piece of content made for me based on what I like, and you can have the same brand could create something for you based on what you like, we are both most likely to like the brand, to take an action, to engage, right? That is the best case scenario. So that is absolutely the path that we need to travel down. However, there's a giant danger here, and we see a lot of brands make this mistake. They try to go to mass personalization. They try to treat that the same way they've treated A/B testing, which is there's software, there's the services out there that try to create 1,000 different variations of the video. And we blast them all out to people, and we figure things out that way, right? And that, again, that disrespects the customer, right? And so maybe at the end of your campaign, you've created an efficient or algorithmic way to tweak the background color of the video, or the message, or something like that, some various features of the video, and you've arrived at a better performing outcome than you would. Great, right? That's great. But the audience has had to sit through thousands of terrible versions, right? and perhaps the idea in the first place, again, this is based still on an idea that someone had that then gets turned into versions, right? So that's still disrespecting the customer. It's still not saying, what does the customer want? Let's start from there. and run the process that way. And so that's the big dichotomy. And some companies I find are going, they're taking that fork towards let's carpet bomb the customer with endless amounts of content, which of course, is funny because even those people at that brand making that choice, they're consumers also, right? So they know that would suck for them, on their drive home when they're going to hear some radio ads or they're going to check out YouTube, right? They would hate that, but they don't. A lot of brands make that mistake, and so it is a great opportunity if we recognize that we should be personalizing based on what the audience wants in the first place. That's my opinion, at least.
Cool. That's a good response. I mean, I like that. Being responsive to the customer. I mean, it's in a sense, it's moving towards, business in general is there's this sort of this, looking forward and retro, thing, the customers first, right? Instead of, the shareholder. The customer first philosophy, I think, is
throughout business. Exactly.
Yeah. So, in the space of data, what different types of data are showing to be the most effective? I mean, what is the most actionable and what isn't?
Yeah. In our world, there's, as I mentioned before, there's kind of like tiers of how easy things are to change, right? When you think about the content creation process for visuals, the hardest to change is the concept to begin with, the strategic level, right? If you chose to, we think our audience will like a family strolling down a beach, so you did all the things required to get a permit and get a photographer and a family to a beach somewhere, and you're filming that. To change that after the fact is expensive and time consuming and a pain. But if the thing we can change that has a really big impact is the text you put over that image or that video after, or the call to action, or the background color of the text, right? That's actually a designer change that can be done after, right? That can be done at, relatively redone with less pain.
Right.
And so that's the spectrum we see is there are impacts changes all around. And of course, the single biggest delta on performance is getting the concept right, getting the strategy right. So using data to do that correctly is the best thing you can do. But if you don't have that data, or if you've made a mistake with your, with a downstream choice, like the background color of this thing is really garish, no one likes it, no one's clicking on it, that's not that troublesome to change, right? Your designer can redo that in maybe a day or a couple hours. And so that's how we think of things is, okay, they have a lot, they think of this almost like a production facility creating, many units of, a bottling facility creating lots of Coca-Colas, right? It's a lot to change the facility. And earlier on in the process causes more downstream changes and is a pain. So the later on, the easier it is to change. And so most effective information is getting the beginning right, getting the strategy right, knowing your audience better, knowing exactly what they want. The analogy I always like to use is if you're opening a restaurant, it'd be really phenomenal to know what ingredients your audience, knowing what your audience is going to visit the restaurant before you open it, knowing what ingredients those audience like best, and knowing how to combine those ingredients for that audience, right? That would make a killer restaurant, right? Most brands aren't doing any of that. Right? They're just opening the restaurant and then trying to figure stuff out. And so for us, the most valuable data is kind of the earlier data, because that saves you from the biggest problems. And then it's hard to predict, of course, the taste changes and the tastes of the audience before you actually get out there.
Well, a lot of here's a question I have that I'm, in my space, I'm also dealing with. So I think you probably are, thinking about this with cookies on the way out. How does that impact the kinds of customer insights that you can get from your content?
Yeah, no, that's a favorite topic of mine, because I don't think a lot of people realize how much is about to change, or really is, changing now currently. The way I kind of like explain it to people is before, if you're a brand, the highest ROI, the best choice you could make is to stalk your prey around the party, right? You have all these creepy ways to follow them around and show up at each conversation and show up at the next party that they go to. And that was the best return on investment available to you. Not only is that going away, but of course that doesn't respect the customer either, right? That's creepy. We all kind of feel icky about that to various degrees. Now, with machine learning, with companies like Cortex and other companies like Cortex in different spaces, you can create the party that the audience wants to go to in the first place, right? Respect their opinion, allow them to choose to come to your party. And if they find themselves voluntarily at your party, right, they're very open to what your message, right? Like, this is the cool party I want to go to. I've come here on my own volition. Let's partake in conversation or business, whatever the case may be, right? That's the analogy, because right now, with cookies going away, the stalker option is getting worse and worse and less profitable. So there has to be another option that brands, available to brands. Luckily, that's the cookies going away thing couldn't have worked better for us, right? We're positioned on the complete opposite side. We're revealing what your audience wants, right? So that's really good for Cortex, and I think just as a consumer, really good in general.
Yeah, I think it's I personally, from a personal point of view, I think it's a great thing. It's a lot of people scared by it. I wonder how we're going to do things like retargeting, which is when getting people to land on the site, then how now you've gotten sort of permission to follow them around, but you won't really be able to the way you used to. So there's a new future we're all looking at to make things effective. But I think that you are in the right space. So when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about the industry and then how people can find out more about you. All right.
Cool. Look forward to it.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC. Uplift, educate, empower.
Are you a small business trying to navigate the COVID-19 related employment laws? Hello, I'm Eric Sauver, employment law, business law attorney, and host of the new radio show, Employment Law Today. On my show, we'll have guests to discuss the common employment law challenges business owners are facing during these trying times. Tune in on Tuesday evenings from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern Time on talkradio.nyc.
Howdy, I am Joseph Franklin McElroy, host of the new podcast, Gateway to the Smokies. It airs on talkradio.nyc every Tuesday night from 6 p.m. to 7. Every episode is dedicated to memorable experiences in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park and surrounding areas. This show features experts and locals who expound upon the richness of culture, history, and adventure that awaits you in the Smokies. Tune in every Tuesday from 6 p.m. to 7 on talkradio.nyc.
Do you love or are you intrigued about New York City and its neighborhoods? I'm Jeff Goodman, host of Rediscovering New York, a weekly show that showcases New York's history and its extraordinary neighborhoods. Every Tuesday live at 7 p.m., we focus on a particular neighborhood and explore its history, its vibe, its feel, and its energy. Tune in live every Tuesday at 7 p.m. on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Hello, it's Joseph Franklin McElroy, back with the Wise Content Creates Wealth podcast with my guest, Brennan White. So Brennan, in 2020, you Cortex sponsored a study on the ROI of AI at enterprises. I thought that was really interesting. Like over 1,200 companies were interviewed, and they got a lot of fascinating and surprising info. So what do you think are some great takeaways from that study?
Well, yeah, there's a ton of takeaways, and depending on the audience's kind of interest, there might be some relevant to their industry, their role, various things. So they can actually go to Cortex's website and find the whole details there. But actually, yeah, there's some crazy takeaways that blew everyone's hair back. We ended up presenting those at Adweek in Asia and Martech conferences in Belgium and various other places, of course, via Zoom this year.
Is it true that the average enterprise spends $38 million on AI?
That's true.
That's
and that was
crazy.
true last year. That's going up a lot more.
Yeah.
That's a big one. Another one that blew people's back, especially in the content space, is that 76% of CMOs are already planning or using AI. And by 2023, those same set of CMOs, 97% of them said that they will be implementing some sort of AI by 2023. So 2 years from now, effectively every CMO will have AI in market. And the other thing that kind of goes hand in hand with that stat was it's not that they will be dabbling or that they're even dabbling now. The average CMO that is doing something in AI now has 11 separate projects underway currently. Mm-hmm. So it's not like, oh, we'll try one thing, one vendor's got AI. They're trying it for chatbots, they're trying it for content, they're trying it for website, they're trying it for their mobile app, they're trying it everywhere. Because I think everyone understands that it's going to have, AI itself is kind of like an electricity level impact on the economy, and no one's exactly clear where it's going to have the most impact. So everyone's trying to get ahead of, doesn't want to get completely left in the dust.
I think you're exactly right. I mean, one of the reasons I decided to make the move now to do this Wise Content Creates Wealth podcast is that it's the time is now. All right. And I've been, I won't mention my age, but it's well enough that I was at the beginning of AI at Duke University doing alpha beta searches, alpha beta algorithms for AI. So I've been in AI a long time, but I never got the opportunity to do it professionally. But now it's kind of bringing me full circle to be involved with it. Cool. I'm in the SEO space. I saw last year. I just had to ask you about this. You did a speech on the conference. How content and SEO teams should work together. Any key insights you could let me know about?
Sure. Yeah. So there's a plug for a non-Cortex company. There's a company out there called Market Muse, who we've actually partnered with a few times. I frequently will say they're the Cortex of text as a shortcut. They completely different tech, very different actually in detail. But to the end user, they're using machine learning to understand Google's knowledge graph, how Google thinks of concepts, and then tell you what to write about. Right.
They're coming on the show in a few weeks. Yeah.
That's awesome. There's quite a few people there that I really like. Jeff Aki. Hopefully one of those guys is coming on. Yeah. But anyway, cool. I'll be sure to watch. But yeah, they are the experts at this, so they can certainly kind of expound for an entire hour on it. But yeah, SEO and visual content are effectively sisters, right? Mm-hmm. When we say we don't care about text, we don't focus on that, we're kind of lying, right? We care a lot about the text that goes along with a visual, right? So, and increasingly, that's the majority of pieces of text, right? Like the caption that goes with the YouTube video, as you talked about actually in your intro, right? The captions that go along with YouTube actually have a giant impact on discovery of the video and therefore how it performs. And so for us to say we're using machine learning to optimize for YouTube, we have to care about that text too. So there's actually quite a tight relationship, but we don't play in text specific stuff like Market Muse owns that, right? And vice versa. But yeah, in terms of the kind of philosophy, it's effectively the same, right? The way one thing we haven't really talked about, I've been focusing on about creating the content for the user and respecting the user. But what Market Muse does and what Cortex also does is each of these platforms has algorithms, right? And so even if I created content that's perfect for you, if I put it on Facebook and the Facebook algorithm disagrees, they're not going to show it to you, right? So there's actually a second layer. It's creating content that, respecting your audience, creating content that your audience wants, but making sure it's the kind of content that algorithm will show to that person. So it's actually slightly more complex. And so Market Muse does that perfectly. Cortex does that as well. And so in SEO, you're kind of playing the algorithm and the person at the same time, right? There's kind of two games going on. And that's true as well with what we do. And so I say that's the biggest thing that a content creator needs to realize is it's not as simple as what does Google say, right? It's not as simple as what does my audience want. It's actually the combination. And unfortunately, the algorithm is changing, sometimes unannounced, sometimes announced, and the tastes are changing, right? So it actually ends up being a thing that humans are particularly bad at understanding both, and as they change the relationship, but AI is great at that, right? AI can stay on top of that easily, and me as a marketer, content guy, I don't have to worry about it anymore. So it's actually well suited to kind of giving itself over to AI eventually. So, but it's an interesting problem, and you could talk about it for a long time because there's so many aspects of the interplay between those two pieces.
So we're getting close now. So what is the current state of Cortex, and what's your near future look like?
Yeah, we've just entered so far the most exciting part of the journey so far. We closed some capital towards the end of last year. We closed some capital again 2 weeks ago. We're growing rapidly, both in kind of headcount and in customers. And so, it's very fun. For a while there, it was getting, as you heard, it was coming with an idea, proving that it worked, realizing the customers wanted to use us kind of in a broader set of problems, building for that, and then getting it out there, optimizing. So now we've solved for all of that. Now it's just growing rapidly. And so now we're just out, basically getting in front of as many customers as we can, trying to give them a taste. We find the best thing we can do is put it in their hands, have them have that wow moment themselves, right? Because they've never had this data before, right? They never were able to definitively say, what kind of creative combinations of things would drive performance. And even when they thought they had something, right, they may have done an A/B test, is red better, or is blue better, or is green better? They were the one that set that test up. Red, blue, green. The shade of green they chose, the shade of blue they chose, the shade of red they chose, influenced the data that they got. The fact that they didn't choose purple or orange or yellow also influenced the data that they got. Using machine learning to remove all that bias and all the work, but remove all the bias, get you the truth, right? The actual, what does the data say about in this case, we're talking about colors, right? But there's thousands of different things, and there's combinations of those 1,000 things. And so that's the exciting part, is when people see that on their data or their competitors' data, and they can learn from that immediately and test it. That's the wow moment. So we're really just in
so you're pretty
get as many
excited.
brands to experience the wow moment as possible.
So how can people find out more about you and to reach out?
Yeah, meetcortex.com is the website. There's a lot of information there. As you heard, you can get the entire ROI of AI study there. There's a ton of content we publish on our blog, meetcortex.com/blog. Really easy. Also, they can follow me or Cortex on Twitter. Cortex is at meetcortex. I'm at Brannomics on Twitter. And so, yeah, that's a great way to find us. I speak at a lot of conferences, a lot of podcasts, things like that. So
look forward.
And also, I've just joined the International Advertising Association, the board. And so I'll be putting out my own content shortly under the IA.
Well, thank you thank you for being a part of this show, and I look forward to promoting this content that we just produced here all over the place. I want to mention that we're on the talkradio.nyc network, and there's a lot of great shows. The show, I think, preceding this one is Jeremiah Fox on the Entrepreneurial Web. You can find out more about this show at wisecontentcreateswealth.com. And my company is GalileoTechMedia.com. It's a leading provider of SEO services, thoughtfully managed SEO services that will transform your business. I will have another great show next week. And thank you again, Brennan.
Thanks.
You're listening to Talk Radio.